Welcome to topic 3. This week we start to take a closer look at the change process itself. So not just the influences upon us, but how we actually go about influencing change in a school environment. We start by having a look at this notion of a VUCA environment, and VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. It comes from the military, US military, to describe the modern battlefield, and while it's fair to say that teaching and learning leadership in schools is not like a battlefield, I think we can probably draw some conclusions around the type of complex environments we do work in and how often your day is thrown by something that's unexpected. Change of key staff or a critical incident in your school. And so I think it's a nice piece to consider in learning from how other leaders manage a complex environment. I'm just going to return to a SWOT analysis as well, because in understanding our environment, that VUCA environment perhaps, we also need to be able to document that, assess it and put it down, and that is part of the assessment task that you'll be undertaking. Now, the SWOT analysis is fairly straightforward. Often it's done as a matrix, as in the slide I'm showing here now. And as I said last week, if you did a search in Google or your favourite search engine, you will find a mountain of information around SWOT analysis. So I'd encourage you to have a read of the material you can access. Don't forget to keep an idea on where you've sourced it from, so you can put it in your reference list. But undertaking a SWOT analysis is often a first step in documenting and understanding the environment that we are working in. We'll return now to an oldie but a goodie. There's a matrix, goes back to 1987, authored by the name of Ambrose, and in a publication called Managing Complex Change. And it's a really nice little picture on some of the key elements in a strategic sense that a leader needs to consider when they're undertaking a change process. So you'll note in the matrix there's a number of columns that pretty well self-explanatory, but vision, skills, incentives, resources and an action plan. If you've got all of those things in a change agenda, you'll end up with change. But as you notice, you move down the matrix, if vision's missing, what often ends up happening is you end up with confusion amongst your people. If the skill set's not there, there's a level of anxiety. If the incentives aren't there, if there's no feeling that I need to get on with this change because it's going to benefit me in some way, it doesn't have to necessarily be monetary, but the incentive is important. If it's missing, this tool would say that you will end up with resistance from players in the change agenda. If the resources aren't there, then everyone's just frustrated. You need to resource a change agenda, and it's important. I mean, you know that in schools, if you are serious about improving literacy, reading scores, for example, then there's an investment required in time, in personnel, and perhaps physical resources as well. And last of all, if you don't actually think through the action plan in terms of timelines and documenting what you want to achieve, then there's lots of false starts. Now, if you have a look on the internet on that one too, there are countless variations of that matrix. As I said, it's been around for quite a while, but it's a useful tool when starting to plan out what you want to achieve and how you're going to go about it. Which brings me to a more modern approach on change, and I've included reading around readiness for change, or readiness, teacher readiness and school improvement. The concept comes from the human resource area and talent management, authored by the name of Schumann. Now, he talks about talent being a function of alignment, capability and engagement. And so basically saying if your workforce is not aligned, doesn't have the capabilities or doesn't feel like it has the capabilities to deliver and isn't engaged in the agenda, and you can see some links back to the matrix I just spoke about, then you're behind the 8 ball. So let's have a closer look at the report. You'll see that it's divided into a number of sections. So and it sources data from two main sources. The first is the NAPLAN database, and the second is a 30-item survey that the staff of the school undertake. So in the top section of the report, this is purely a picture of how the school has performed in NAPLAN over a 3-year period, and the green comparative line is the target top 10% of similar schools. So in this case, you can see that the school's performance has been increasing, and it's actually performing at the top 10% or better of like schools along the 5 domains of the NAPLAN test. If you go down to the staff readiness indicator, the dots there indicate the big dot, the overall performance of the school. The next one is the teaching staff, and the smaller one, the non-teaching staff. So all staff are surveyed, and there are 2 areas within alignment, capability and engagement that are measured on the test. The dotted line there, as I understand it, comes from comparison of all schools in the sample. So in this case, again, the school's readiness indicators are all above similar schools. So that means, go down to the next section, the school's readiness classification. So staff's readiness is primed and the students are performing. And you can see the dimensions go down to the bottom one is the staff wouldn't be ready and the school isn't performing. And then the bottom section basically draws responses from the 30-item survey and gives a overview of the top 5 contributors to readiness and the 5 impediments to readiness, which gives the school leader a bit of an indication of where they should be investing their time and where they should be celebrating. Now, the interesting piece around this readiness indicator, the readiness report, is that it's been correlated to NAPLAN results. So in a school district in Australia, we know that high levels of readiness correlate to high levels of performance in NAPLAN, and particularly Year 3 NAPLAN. This study had been undertaken in a primary school setting primarily. So that is interesting in that it confirms the tool's reliability, but also gives school leaders the idea that, can confirm for school leaders that if they're getting good scores on the readiness report, they can expect higher performance in NAPLAN. So within those impediments, for example, there might be areas there that a school leader can pick up on and say, okay, these are areas I need to improve. It might be that the staff aren't feeling like they've got the resources that they need or have the skill set that they need to progress the agenda we've laid out. So there are some potential cues in a change process for school leaders in that report. So there's 2 examples, one from 1987, as I said, an oldie but a goodie. You've probably seen it before, but it certainly gives some keys for what should be considered in a change process, right through to a brand new piece of emerging research that I think will have quite significant implications for school leaders as it gets traction and is used in other settings